Hi everyone. My name is Theo. I'm the director of programming here at Try Together, and I'm super excited to welcome everyone back to the Learn Together series this month. Today we are joined by Jeremy Lurier, who's an accredited wealth management advisor, and the first vice president of investments at Lurier Financial Group. He joined the team there in 2018, serving as an empowering resource for his clients as they navigate their own financial journey. In his free time, he enjoys spending time outdoors, staying active, reading, playing chess, and is graciously taking the time to speak with us today. We are so grateful to have him here as our Learn Together speaker this month to talk about finance. And with that, I welcome Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Theo. And thank you, everybody, for coming to listen about one of the most exciting topics in the world, finance and money. Um, what I'm trying to do with this presentation here is do kind of a brief, uh, kind of 30,000 foot view of, entering the workforce, getting a paycheck, bank accounts, depositing money, budgeting, investing money, and then also touching on credit and that sort of thing. So along the way, at the end of each kind of section of each different topic, I'll open it up to questions. So if anyone has a question, I'll open it up and feel free to ask. So we'll get started here. So, kind of setting the foundation here for what I'm going to be talking about. Money skills are life skills. The earlier you start learning them, the more they're going to shape your choices, the opportunities you have, and your sense of independence. Money shows up in just about every part of our life, everything from buying groceries, getting around, planning for school, finding housing, and working toward future goals. For a lot of people, especially young adults, money decisions can feel high pressure. There may be fewer safety nets and not always someone available to guide you through. It's kind of wild that something so essential isn't really taught in school. And that's why having practical, real world financial knowledge isn't just helpful, it's necessary. And when you understand how money works, it can lower stress, help build your confidence, and help you avoid common traps like overdraft fees, high interest debt, or credit issues that can follow you for years. This is also a good moment to remember you don't need to be rich, highly educated, or great at math to manage money well. What really matters most are your habits, your awareness, and your willingness to ask questions and keep learning along the way. Everyone comes into this with a different starting point. Some of you might already be working. Others might be getting ready for your first job, and some of you might be handling money on your own for the first time. Wherever you're starting, that's completely okay, because this isn't about being perfect, it's about making progress. In fact, being new to this can actually be an advantage because you have the chance to build strong money habits from the beginning. And by the end of this session, my goal is for you to feel more comfortable reading a paycheck, using a bank account safely, creating a simple budget, understanding how money can grow over time, and knowing how credit works before you use it. At the end of the day, money is just a tool, and when you learn how to use it well, it can open doors, protect your future, and give you more control over your story. Today's discussion is meant to give you a clear, practical look at the money topics you're most likely to run into during your teens and early adulthood. You can think of it as a roadmap to help you handle real-life financial decisions with a little more confidence. We're going to start our discussion with first jobs and understanding a paycheck, because earning your own income is usually the first time you really interact with the financial system. From there, we're going to move into the basics of banking, how checking and savings accounts work, and how to protect your money from common issues like overdrafts, fraud, and scams. Next, we're going to talk about budgeting for real life, because let's be honest, life isn't always predictable. Income changes, unexpected expenses pop up, and bills don't always stay the same. So this part is all about learning how to plan around life's expected and unexpected expenses. After that, we're going to get into investing and the power of compounding. Basically, compounding is how even small amounts of money can grow over time if you stay consistent and give it enough time to work. Then we'll cover Credit 101, breaking down what credit actually is, how credit scores work, and why the financial decisions you make early on can follow you for years. Throughout this session, everything we talk about will connect back to everyday situations, things like part-time jobs, debit cards, rent, phone bills, and credit cards. So it all feels practical and real. We'll also touch on situations that many youth face, like managing your own money for your first time, finding reliable information, and knowing where to go when you need help. I'll be covering everything at a high level, as I said before, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. So if there's something you want to go deeper on or something you have a question about, feel free to bring it up. Happy to answer it. And one last thing I just want to highlight is learning about money isn't something you do once and check off of a list. It's an ongoing process, and every step you take adds up. So the first topic we're going to cover here is earning and managing income from jobs, as well as understanding a paycheck. So your first paycheck can feel exciting, but also a little confusing. A lot of people expect one number on their paycheck and then notice the amount that actually hits their bank account is smaller. And that's completely normal. And once you understand why, it starts to make a lot more sense. So to start, let's break down a few key terms. And I've included a little sample paycheck here. Um, that's paid weekly to this guy, George Matthew. So the first term I want to cover is gross pay. And that's what you can see right here is gross pay. And that's the total amount you earned before any deductions. So before taxes and that sort of thing that you see here, there's taxes and deductions. So your gross pay is the total money you earned. Then there's net pay, which is often referred to as your take-home pay. And that's what you actually receive after deductions. So your net pay is over here. And you can see the way this is laid out, your gross pay is here, then it shows you the deductions, and then it shows you your net pay. So your net pay is what you're actually going to take home. These deductions here typically include things like federal and state taxes, along with Social Security and Medicare. These are programs people rely on throughout their lives, but when you first see them coming out of your paycheck, it can definitely catch you off guard because it's probably more money than you expected to come out of your paycheck. And this is where this right here is called your pay stub. This right here, which details, your gross pay, your deductions, your net pay. Your pay stub gives you a detailed breakdown of your hours worked, your earnings, and exactly what was taken out. It's included with your paycheck. So your paycheck's here, right? And then here's your pay stub. And learning how to read a pay stub is a really valuable skill. It helps you catch mistakes, keep track of your income for budgeting, and provide proof of income when you need it for things like housing or benefits. Understanding how your paycheck works can also help protect you. It makes it easier to spot if something's off, like being underpaid or classified incorrectly at a job. And different situations can affect your pay too, such as working hourly versus salary, earning tips, or getting overtime pay. At the end of the day, your paycheck isn't just about the money, it's also very valuable information. And when you understand this information, you're in a much better position to stay in control, feel confident about your finances, and plan ahead. So as far as paychecks go, does anyone have any questions on this topic?
That's so helpful. I feel like they're inevitably so confusing.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a foreign language when you first get your paycheck. If there aren't any questions, I know it's fairly straightforward. Um, so if anyone, has a question at the end, you can always ask it then. But if there's nothing
And
now, I
feel
can.
free to put them in chat if you don't want to ask out loud.
A question I have is if you do see an issue like that you might like be expecting a certain number versus seeing a different number when you get your paycheck, like how would you approach that and like how do you figure
Yeah.
out what's going on?
Yeah. So I think it depends on like the size of the company you're working for. With a larger company, if there is something, like an HR department, you could bring it up to the HR department. Otherwise, if you're working, let's say, at a smaller kind of establishment, you could always go to your manager. I'd probably go to your manager first to discuss it with them. And if you still feel like there's an issue, there's also outside organizations I think you can contact, that kind of keep an eye on these things and can investigate those sort of things if there is some bad practices going on. Typically nowadays, things are so streamlined, through technology and everything else that it's not so much like when you punch in on the clock, it's like it's all electronic now. So there's not as much room for discrepancy, I would say, but things do happen, technical glitches do happen. So it is something good just to be mindful of and just to look over. All right, so I'll move here. Next topic we'll cover here is banking basics and staying safe with money. So we got the paycheck, and now we're talking about, banking the paycheck. So banking basics are really the foundation of managing your money day to day. When you understand how they work, it becomes a lot easier to keep your money both accessible and also safe. The two main types of bank accounts you'll use are checking and savings accounts. A checking account is for your everyday spending, things like groceries, gas, bills. A savings account, on the other hand, is where you set money aside for future needs or goals. You'll also use tools like debit cards, ATMs, and mobile or online banking. These make everything more convenient, of course, but they also come with additional responsibility. Staying safe is a big part of banking, so it's important to protect your PIN, which is the code associated with your debit card. Be cautious of scams like phishing emails or fake texts. And also, very important is remember that your bank will never randomly ask you for sensitive information, like your social security number, your date of birth, that sort of thing. So if you ever get a weird call or a text that's asking you for that type of sensitive information, do not reply to it. I would contact your bank and I would run it by them, and they can usually verify or confirm that it is fraud. It's much better to get in touch with them and have them confirm that, with you, rather than you go through a situation where your sensitive information is now compromised and you're trying to shut that down, because that can turn into a nightmare. And also keep in mind that the scams and the fraud and stuff is, sadly, it's just going to get better with the use of AI. It's going to get more complex and more convincing. So definitely something to be mindful of. It's also worth paying attention to fees. Things like overdraft charges or out-of-network ATM fees can add up quickly, and drain funds out of your account if you're not careful. So if you bank with, let's say, Bank of America, but you go to a Chase Bank ATM to take money out, you're going to be charged an ATM fee, and that's typically, somewhere around $3 to $5, I would say. But if you're doing that, consistently over time, that money really adds up. So that's something to be mindful of. Choosing the right bank or credit union, which I recommend you looking into, and knowing your rights as a customer can really make a difference. Banking can make life significantly easier when used effectively. Simple steps like setting up direct deposit for your paycheck, so when you get paid, the funds go directly into your bank account. Also, regularly checking your balance through your bank's app provides immediate access to your financial information and kind of helps you stay in the know and control of your money. At the end of the day, banks are just tools there to help you, but they work best when you understand how to use them effectively and how to protect yourself along the way. Does anyone have any questions on banking?
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
I was just wondering if you could expand on overdraft fees a little bit more.
Yeah, so an overdraft fee, basically, if you have in your checking account, if you have, let's say $20 in your checking account, and then you go to pay for something and you go beyond the $20 that you have in your checking account, you're basically in a negative balance now. And so you have to get yourself out of the red back to zero, but they also apply a fee to that. So because you basically used money that you didn't have at the time. So they hit you with a fee, and that's kind of their way of getting paid for it.
Okay, I understand. Usually, how much is that fee?
That's a good question. I would say it varies.
Okay.
Depending on the bank, and also I would imagine it varies depending on the size, right? Like if you really go in the red, I imagine the fee would be higher than if you just kind of dip below.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? All right, I will move on. So our next topic is planning, spending, and saving. Our goal here is to budget for real life and not perfection. So, budgeting sometimes gets a bad reputation because it can sound restrictive or complicated, but really it's about creating freedom and building stability. Instead of wondering where your money went, budgeting helps you take control and decide where it goes. A big part of budgeting is learning the difference between needs and wants. Needs are the essentials, things like rent, groceries, transportation, and basic living expenses. They come first because they're necessary for your survival and your day-to-day life. Wants, on the other hand, are things like entertainment, shopping, subscriptions, or higher-end items. And while it's completely fine and healthy to treat yourself sometimes, those wants shouldn't take priority over your needs. One simple way to think about budgeting is a 50-30-20 guideline. It's not a strict rule, but it's a helpful starting point. And the idea is, with the 50-30-20, is that about 50% of your income goes towards covering your needs, your rent, your groceries, your bills. 30% of that income goes towards your wants. So things you want to spend money on, subscriptions, Netflix, Spotify, that sort of thing. And then 20% of your income or your paycheck is going towards savings or paying down debt if you have any debt. Of course, life isn't always predictable. Your income might change. You might share expenses, or unexpected costs can pop up, like a car repair or a medical bill. And that's what can make budgeting feel tough sometimes. But having a plan, even a flexible one, can give you a lot more clarity and peace of mind when those situations come up. The goal here is not perfection. It's about building practical habits. Things like tracking your spending, making sure your essential bills are covered first, and setting aside even small amounts for savings when you can. And most importantly, your budget should work for you. It should be flexible and it should evolve as your life changes. When you approach it in the right way, budgeting can lower stress, help you avoid relying on high interest debt, and give you more confidence in handling your everyday financial decisions. Any questions on budgeting? Okay, no worries. We will move on. If anyone does have a question on budgeting, feel free to ask it at the end. So our next topic is building wealth over time through investing and the power of compounding. So far, we've earned a paycheck, we've deposited the funds into a bank account, and we've created our budget. And a portion of that budget is allocated towards savings. Once you've established sufficient savings, you can begin investing. The amount considered sufficient will vary based on your monthly expenses, but a common best practice is to set aside 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses before transitioning into investing. So you can look, through a bank app, you can look at your spending for a month And let's say, after you've been paying bills for let's say 3 months, you can look at that and you get kind of an average amongst those 3 months as to how much you're paying for expenses each month. And the best practice is to have 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses saved in a savings account before you begin investing, because that will provide you with a financial cushion in case of a job loss or an unexpected expense. And it helps ensure you have readily available funds when you need them. So that is definitely a good practice. 3 to 6 months worth of expenses covered. So investing can seem like something that's only for wealthy people, but that's really not the case. It's much more about time, consistency, and simply getting started, even if you're starting small. And the good news is that today it's more accessible than ever, and it's one of the most powerful ways to grow your money over time. At the heart of investing is a concept called compounding. Think of it like this: your money earns growth, and then that growth starts earning its own growth. Over time, that snowball effect can really build into something meaningful. And I'll show you an example of this on the next slide. Even small, consistent contributions can add up if you give them enough time. It's also important to understand the difference between saving and investing. Saving is generally safer and provides easy access to your money, making it ideal for short-term goals or emergencies, as I touched on before. Investing, on the other hand, involves some level of risk, but offers the potential for higher returns and long-term growth. The stock market goes up and down, and that's completely normal. Those short-term changes can feel uncomfortable, but they're part of the process. That's why investing works best when you take a long-term approach, while your savings can be there to help cover unexpected expenses along the way. The key takeaway is this: you don't need a lot to get started. You just need time, consistency, and a willingness to learn as you go. So Albert Einstein said, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." And once you see how it works, that quote really starts to make sense. If you look at the graph on the left here, it shows the power of compounding in action. Take investor one. She starts investing $5,000 a year at age 25 and does that for just 10 years and then stops contributing. But she leaves her money invested for the next 30 years. Now look at investor two. He doesn't start investing until age 35. He invests the same $5,000 a year, but continues investing that $5,000 a year for a full 30 years. You'd think investor two would come out ahead since he invested more money overall, but that's not what happens. Investor one actually ends up with more, simply because she started earlier and gave her money more time to compound. That's really the key takeaway. Time in the market matters more than trying to put in the most money all at once. On the right side, there's also a table showing something called the rule of 72. And this is just a quick, simple way to estimate how long it takes for your money to double, your money or even your debt to double at a certain interest rate. So for example, if you're earning 10% a year, which is quite high, but just to make it easy, if you divide 72 by 10, the rule of 72 says it's going to take about 7.2 years for your money to double. So if you're earning about 8% a year, which is typically on average what the market has earned historically, you divide 72 by 8, which gives you 9. So it would take you roughly 9 years for your money to double. At the end of the day, the goal here isn't to chase quick wins or take big risks. It's about starting when you can, staying consistent, and letting compounding quietly do the heavy lifting over time.
So if
Does
someone
any-
doesn't, oh, sorry. If
Yep.
someone doesn't have $5,000 a year at this point in their life, like if they can
Right.
put $250 a year, do you think they're still, like, it's still worth starting early?
Absolutely. The earlier you start, the better. 100%. I'm really big on the emergency savings before you start getting into investing, because the worst thing is to not have your emergency savings tucked away. and you've been investing some money, but suddenly you have an expense come up in life, and you have to take this money out of the market. So that's not ideal for a variety of reasons, some tax reasons too, that I won't dive too deep into here. But yeah, contributing anything is better than nothing. And the sooner you begin, just based off this example here, the sooner you begin, the better. It doesn't have to be a ton of money, but basically your money is going to start earning on top of it, and that snowball compounding effect is just gonna begin sooner. So $5,000 is just what's on this illustration here. It's just kind of an easy whole number to think about. But even if you can do $20, every few weeks or something like that, that's really good. And over time, you have to be patient with it. You have to leave it, let it be and let it earn. And over time, you'll be impressed with what it can amount to. And one other thing I guess I'll touch on real quick is nowadays, you can have your paycheck go direct deposit into your bank account, but what you can also set up on a lot of these investing apps, on your phone and that sort of thing, is you can set up like a fixed contribution. So let's say every month on the first of the month, I want to contribute $20, to my investments. You can set that up. So every month on the first of the month, you don't even have to think about it. It's just taking $20 out of your bank account and, putting it in your investment account. And the good thing about that is it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. So, you come around to it to check on your investment account, and suddenly it's looking better than it was looking before. And the other thing is, by having it automatically draw those funds out of your bank account, you're not tempted to go spend those, that $20 on a want, and instead it's kind of just working behind the scenes without you, even realizing that $20 has left your bank account, but it's moved to your investment account. So that's a good practice too, setting up those automatic contributions. And you can do them weekly, you can do them monthly. The sky's the limit with how you want to customize that. So the next topic here is credit 101. What to know before you need it, using credit wisely, and avoiding common traps. So credit plays a big role in everyday adult life. It can affect things like whether you're able to rent an apartment, get a car, or even qualify for certain jobs. So what is credit exactly? At its simplest, it's the ability to borrow money now and pay it back later. So the first part of credit I'm going to touch on is credit cards. One of the most common ways people use credit is through a credit card. When you swipe a credit card, you're essentially borrowing money from a bank or a lender to make a purchase. At the end of the month, you'll get a bill. It's your credit card statement, and that's when it's time to pay the money back. You usually have two payment options on your monthly credit card statement. First option is that you can pay the full balance owed, which is everything you charged on the credit card that month, and this avoids interest completely. The second option is to pay part of the balance you owe, and the remaining balance that you didn't pay off gets charged interest. And with credit cards, it's not a pretty interest rate. It's a high interest rate. And going back to the power of compounding that we discussed, it's good when compounding's working for you and for your money, but it's not good when compounding is working against you on debt that you owe. That can turn into a really messy situation. If you carry a balance from month to month, that interest can add up fast, and that turns what seems like a small purchase into something much more expensive over time. Used the right way, credit cards can be helpful for building credit and managing planned expenses, but if you're not careful, they can lead to debt that's hard to get out of, and that can follow you for years. Think back as I said before, to the power of compound interest that we discussed, it can be detrimental to have compound interest working against you and increasing your debt. So at the end of the day, credit isn't extra money. It's a tool, and it needs to be used responsibly. And, in my opinion, I won't touch credit. If you have to, if you're in a situation where, you have to, and you feel good about being able to pay it back at the end of the month, I completely understand that. But I would say it's kind of like, I wouldn't use it if I didn't have to, because if you get into one of those situations with debt, it can really make things difficult for you. And I feel like that's not talked about enough. So that's something to be mindful of. The second topic or component of credit I want to touch on are loans. A loan's a little different. A loan is when you borrow a larger amount of money and you pay it back over time, typically in a fixed monthly payment. So some common examples of loans include car loans, student loans, personal loans, that sort of thing. When you take out a loan, you agree upfront to a certain interest rate, which is basically the cost of borrowing that money. And so the higher the interest rate, the more you're going to end up paying over time. Loans can be helpful for big expenses you can't cover all at once, like a car or your education, but they also come with responsibility. Missing payments or borrowing more than you can handle can create stress that sticks around for quite a long time. The last component here of credit that I want to touch on is a credit score. So your credit score is basically a number that tells lenders, who are the people that lend you money, it tells them how reliable you are when it comes to borrowing money, how well they can rely on you to pay that money back. So it's kind of you can think of it as your financial reputation. And it's based on a few factors. The first is your payment history, and this has the biggest impact on your score. And with payment history, the big question is, do you pay your bills on time? If you pay your bills on time, then you'll have a great payment history, and that has the biggest impact on your credit score. So that's very important. The second factor is the amounts owed through your credit card and that sort of thing. How much of your available credit are you using? So if you have, let's say, $1,000 limit on your credit card, are you maxing out your credit card every month and using the full $1,000, or are you, let's say, just using it to pay a Spotify subscription that's about $15 a month? If you're using less credit than what's available, that helps boost your score. If you're maxing your credit card out each month, that typically is not favorable to your credit score. The third factor is the length of your credit history. So how long have you been using credit? That's something that just takes time. There's really no way to, to have an impact on that factor. It's just a matter of when you begin using credit. If you do get a credit card, that kind of starts the clock there. The fourth factor is the type of credit. So do you have a mix of credit, like cards, credit cards, loans? Typically, the more things you have out there, the better idea those lenders have as to, if you're able to manage all these credit expenses and how reliable you are. And the fifth factor is new credit. So are you opening a lot of new accounts at once? So if you're going and you're getting 3 credit cards at once and you're going and getting a loan at the same time, all of that is going to typically impact your credit score negatively, just because to lenders, it's telling them that you're going and you're seeking a lot of, outside credit right now. And so they're a little more hesitant because they don't know your situation, but it's kind of telling them something without really telling them something. So a higher credit score can make life easier and cheaper when it comes to things like renting, borrowing, or even landing certain jobs. A lower credit score can make those same things more difficult and more expensive. One common myth is that you need to carry a balance to build credit. You don't need to carry a balance. A simple, smart way to start building credit, as I touched on before, is to use a credit card for one small regular expense, like a streaming subscription, and then pay it off in full every month. Something that's, let's say, $10 is pretty manageable to pay off each month. So you don't have to worry about not being able to pay it off. And at the same time, you're showing to the creditors that you're able to pay it off each month. So you're basically displaying that you're responsible with your credit, and that helps boost your score. The goal here is to understand how credit works before you really need it, so you can make confident, informed decisions instead of feeling pressured or unsure in the moment. The worst thing is to start using credit without fully understanding, what you're getting yourself into. I'm not saying don't do it, but you really need to be aware of the full picture before you get involved with that. That would be my advice there. Using credit wisely really comes down to a few simple things: staying disciplined, planning ahead, and thinking about the long-term impact of your choices. It's less about being perfect and more about building consistent, practical habits, like paying your bills on time, keeping your balances low, and understanding how interest works. It's also important to remember that small mistakes can turn into bigger problems pretty quickly. Something like a missed payment or carrying a high balance can start to snowball and compound if you're not paying attention. That's why the little details matter. Checking your credit card statements, knowing your due dates, the dates at which your credit card payments are due, because they're not always going to be on the last day of the month or the first day of the following month. Sometimes they're midway through the month. So that's really important to know so you don't miss your due dates. And then setting up reminders or automatic payments so nothing slips through the cracks. You can link your bank account to your credit card company to have it automatically pay each month, so you don't have to think about paying your credit card bills. You just need to make sure that you have more money in your bank account than what's needed to pay that credit card bill, because as we talked about overdraft earlier, you could have a situation where you're paying this credit card bill off with your bank account and suddenly you're in the negative in your bank account, but you paid your credit card bill. So that's not a good situation to be in. Another thing to watch out for is outside pressure. There are plenty of credit card offers out there that are not always in your best interest. And it's easy to feel pushed into spending money on things you don't really need. I know sometimes if you're shopping at a retail store, they'll offer you a 15% discount on your purchase today if you open up the credit card with them. A good rule of thumb is to only borrow what you can pay back. Use credit for planned purchases and think of it as a safety net, not something you rely on for everyday lifestyle spending. The big picture here is that good credit doesn't happen overnight. It's built over time through steady, responsible habits. The sooner you start taking care of it, the more money, stress, and frustration you can save yourself down the road. It also helps to remember that all the pieces we've talked about, credit cards, loans, and your credit score, are all connected. How you use credit cards and how you repay loans directly shapes your credit score. So if you keep these 3 habits in mind, you'll be in a really strong position. 1 is to only borrow what you can afford to pay back. 2 is to pay on time every time. And 3 is to keep your balances manageable. When you understand how all of this works together, credit becomes something you're in control of, not something that controls you. Does anyone have any questions on credit or anything else that I've discussed?
I have a question on investing.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that it's recommended to add like monthly or weekly payments of like the same amount of money to one stock, is what I'm getting.
So the way So after you have your savings, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
have your 3 to 6 months of savings. Um, what I would say is a best practice is to invest. If you're going to invest in something, I would invest it in like an S&P 500 ETF,
Mhm.
which sounds like a whole mouthful of words there. The S&P 500 it's composed of the 500 largest U.S. companies. So that's everything from like Apple and Amazon to Costco and everything in between. Um, and so that's kind of the benchmark for the market. That's typically what's referred to as the benchmark. So something like that, if you're investing in an S&P 500 ETF or an index, that's giving you exposure to those 500 companies. So if you put $20 in to that S&P index, you're getting exposure. You own now a piece of those 500 companies. So that's a lot better than buying one company or one stock, because when you buy one company, you're concentrating your risk, right? And if something bad happened with that company, could be anything.
Mhm.
Um, that's your investments right there that are all relying on that one company to perform. So it's much better practice to buy an index, the S&P 500 index, which you can read about online. A common stock symbol for that is SPY. They call it the SPY. That's the S&P 500 index. So owning something like that, you're exposed to 500 of the largest U.S. companies. And so if one company has, a horrible year, and the stock's selling off, it affects you much less because the other 499 companies, that you're exposed to are still pulling their weight,
Right.
and so that's a better way to go than to just be buying one stock.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
The index. Yeah, and you can read about indexing and ETFs, which are called
That's right.
for exchange traded funds, is what that's short for.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Going on, Justania.
Hi, Jeremy. I have a
Hey.
question. Hey.
Yeah, what's up?
So I wanted to know what is the fastest way of someone building credit? I know that you talked about credit cards
Mm-hmm.
and you said that obviously it's not always good. So I'm
Yep.
just wondering, like, what is like the fastest way? What is the best way of building credit? Like, is it through car financing? Is it through purchasing a home? Like, what are the like quickest way to build credit?
Yeah, I think you know, I don't know if there's one way that necessarily speeds it up, because time is a big factor. They want to see that you're able to pay consistently over time. That's a really big deal, because some people might be able to cover their credit expenses for the first few months, but then the wheels kind of start falling off, and um, and then it's kind of a whole different situation there. So I think if you're looking to dip your toes into the world of credit, and the way I've personally built up my own credit score, I literally I just had a credit card and I didn't use it for anything but for paying my Spotify subscription for like 10 years, and it got my credit score up like a lot. And so that's been my own personal strategy for getting my credit score up. And then when I needed a car loan, my credit score was up high, and I didn't have to take a big loan out to get my credit score up, up to where it was. I was just paying a $15 a month Spotify subscription, so I think time is a big factor. And then, as I said, your payment history is the biggest. It has the biggest impact on your score. So that is time. Do you pay your bills on time?
Thank
So
you. That
yeah,
helps. That helps a lot. So it's just making sure that you can afford to pay what you're taking out of the credit card, pretty much.
exactly. You don't want to run into a situation where you can't pay off the full amount that's owed at the end of the month, because back to the compounding thing, there's high interest rates on these credit cards, right? And you won't pay any interest if you pay what you owe at the end of that month or the end of that period. But if you let a balance carry over to the next pay period, they tack on a lot of interest onto that amount. And so suddenly next month, if you bought all these things and spent your credit card on all these items, well, now there's this debt that you're carrying over from the previous pay period that's stacking on top of what you need to pay off in that following month. And if you don't pay that balance off, it carries over again and it keeps growing. So it can kind of turn into this snowball effect.
Whereas
That can
it's impossible to eliminate it.
Right, right. And then
All right.
people, fall into these situations where they have to declare bankruptcy and do other things. And it can drastically affect, you know, parts of your life. Like when you're trying to get loans and stuff like that, it's not good. So it's best to avoid that situation.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Thoughts, feelings?
This was so helpful. I so appreciate you doing this for us. I
Yeah,
know we hear time and
happy
time
to.
again that, especially as students, kind of like whatever it means to them to go out in the real world, it is money in itself is just intimidating.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. Um, I have one more slide too. I'm sorry. I just realized I had a little outro that I wrote. So I'll cover that too. Um, so managing money is something you build over time. It's all about progress, not perfection. What matters most is learning the basics, understanding where your money comes from, how to protect it, how to plan for expenses, how to grow it, and how to use credit in a smart, responsible way. It's also important to remember that everyone starts in a different place. Not knowing something isn't a weakness, it's just part of the process. In fact, being willing to ask questions and stay curious is one of the best ways to build confidence with money. Taking ownership of your financial decisions and looking for reliable, trustworthy information can make a huge difference over time. I'd encourage you all to keep learning, whether that's through community programs, trusted resources, or financial education tools. There's a wealth of financial education resources online. Even something like AI can be a helpful resource. I know AI doesn't get it right 100% of the times, but what I found AI really good for is a lot of the times we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what our blind spots are because we simply don't know what the blind spots are. And so tools like AI can help fill in those gaps and help uncover those blind spots. And if you have, a certain question about a financial term or something like that, AI can be very helpful for that. At the end of the day, the message is simple. With the right knowledge, habits, and mindset, anyone can build a more stable and secure financial future. And that's all I got for you.
Thank you. I use AI a lot. Um,
Nice.
so it helps me a great deal, like with unanswered questions, because it compiles all the information from, like, I guess they use like algorithms or something to kind of compile and like the data that I'm looking for specifically from the website. So it just puts those at the beginning of the list. But yeah, I use
Yeah.
AI a lot, and I find it to be very helpful. So you're right.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. It's very helpful. And what's funny about like using AI is the skill becomes asking great questions because great questions can uncover great information, and so that's great. Just those sort of things. Keep asking questions. Well, what do you mean by this? What are some examples of that? It can take you down a path where you learn a lot and didn't even realize this path existed.
Right. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was a great talk. I
Happy to
just
do
want to
it.
check to make sure we don't have any other questions before we sign off for the night. If there are any other questions, we can send them to our, Try Together email or like to Hannah, and we can get those to you. We'll also be providing these slides afterwards. And there is a recording that's going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you can always come back and check out this information later.
Cool.
Thank you so
Great.
much, Jeremy.
Yeah, and thank you all. It was a lot of fun, and I can give you my email too, Theo. I'll give you my email, and if you want to, I don't know if you want to put it in the chat or something,
Yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
do that. Okay. I mean, you have my email, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with it, I can put it in the follow-up email if you're comfortable with
Okay.
that.
That's cool. That's cool.
Okay,
Just
I'll do
probably avoiding like online because I don't want spam.
Oh, won't do that. Yep, definitely
Yeah.
not.
But yeah, that's totally cool. That sounds good. So if any of you have questions, and you want to, pick my brain, by all means.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. And thank you so much for everyone for attending this session. We hope to see you next month for our next Learn Together.